Josh Key, welcome to Acquiring Minds.
Hey, Will, long time listener. Glad to finally be on the pod with you, although this is not how I intended it. But as we talked about before, this is part one, part A, the beginning, and so the ending is still yet to be written, and I'm optimistic about that.
That's right. Well, having talked to you in the pre-call, I am too, about your future, Josh. You bought a small plumbing business alongside a partner. Did not go well, as you just teased. And that was due in large part to this partnership and the direction that it took. So we're going to hear this difficult story, this unhappy story of buying a business. And of course, I want to thank you for being willing to share it with the audience for their benefit, Josh. Let's get into it. Let's start off with some background on you, please, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. Any way I can help this community. So background on me. So born and raised in Flint, Michigan. Used to be, still is Buick City, even though Buicks aren't manufactured there anymore. There's an annual 5K there, the Crim. So it kind of runs through the downtown Flint. But born and raised in Flint, proud of that heritage. More of a basketball town back in the late 90s when the Michigan State made their championship run, with most of the starting five being from Flint. Now more infamously known for the water situation, which is still an issue. But born and raised there, ended up going to graduating college from Northwood University, small business-focused, entrepreneurial, free enterprise-driven school, which planted the seeds to my entrepreneurial desires to this day. And so graduated there, ended up going and climbing. Started off in my career with a W-2 job and started climbing my corporate career. Started off with ADP, selling payroll in a sales role. Great experience there. Moved over to Grand Rapids, Michigan, shortly after that. And then transferred with Enterprise down to Arlington, Texas to live with my uncle down there. This is around 20 years ago, almost 20 years back this past April. Wanting to live in a warmer climate. I was tired of scraping cars off with my credit card when you can't find the scraper. Most of our friends in the North can agree with me there and understand what that feeling is like. So I was just tired of that, ready for a change. And so looked at Florida, California, settled on Texas. Did very well with Enterprise. Did various roles from there. Was recruited away to several different companies. Worked at a marketing and advertising agency on Gatorade and Honda. Quickly found out that sales was where, at that moment, sales was where I wanted to be. So short of selling yachts and private jets, medical device and medical equipment was a good way to go. And so through the advice and guidance of some of my mentors and ultimately became my boss, got some really strong B2B experience selling Japanese titanium frames throughout the kind of middle central part of the country, and just kind of got on a milk run in my car from a 1099 basis and established a business that was pretty much on the coast in New York and LA, and then established that central business there. And then was doing very well there, but was recruited away to a medical device company ultimately after growing that business up. And so that was with Stryker Instruments, and spent 3 years there learning, cutting my teeth in the medical device space, and then true hardcore medical device sales. And from there, after 3 years, one of the downsides of being part of one of the greatest regions ever, I guess, really exist within that division at the time. There wasn't an opportunity to move up without a major geographical relocation. Minnesota, Boston. Started off with Stryker, single, when I was willing to do that. 3 years down the road, found the love of my life, my wife, and she's a Texas girl, and she wasn't going anywhere. So, so stuck here. Had to move on from Stryker, various medical device spots. Ended up with my mentor's company, I spent the last 10 years with, and up until this past couple of months ago. And so now, in between there, COVID happened. And so that gets us to our story here. Successful there. I was with a company at the time that was requiring a lot of travel. So I have two young boys that, and a wife that needed me. And so flying off in the at a moment's notice to go cover a case in Houston or New Orleans or Arkansas. It just wasn't feasible. So I started looking for other options in the middle of COVID. So without having any access to any of the HRB or any of the Walker Dyble's or those resources, or your podcast for that matter, it's like, hey, I need to get on the other side of the pay window. What does that look like? And so I found, Google buying a business, Biz Buy Sell came up at the time, and so I started building what I, at the time, was a buy box, right? I need to replace my income or a little bit more than that. So I started looking for companies that were throwing off, at least 300K in EBITDA or
Josh,
SD
let me jump in here.
Sure.
So sorry, rewind a little bit. How did the idea of buying a business come about? You've explained how you needed to make some sort of change in corporate. You were traveling too much, but there are a lot of paths. And why the one of buying a business?
Yeah. So I just felt like I was at a kind of a fork in the road. I knew I've kept always kind of viewed entrepreneurial endeavors. I have several friends that started companies, businesses, bars, different things like that, and just was envious of them. And like that's where true wealth is made. And so, as I alluded to earlier, I went to a school that was really strong and really was based on entrepreneurship and free enterprise. And so those seeds were planted there.
You said you hadn't been exposed to what we call search or entrepreneurship through acquisition via the books or social media or something. This was something that you kind of arrived at on your own.
I did. And so, initially my goal was so I found the plumbing company, liked the numbers. It's like, do I need to be a plumber to buy a plumbing company? Googled that, made a couple of phone calls, talked to the broker that was representing the seller. And said he didn't think about that. And so we looked into that, and they're like, no, you don't need to do that. And so at that point, my wife and I, we've had, significant, decent sized savings built up in our 401ks. And so, okay, how can we finance this? And so,
and Josh, what had your criteria been when you went to Biz Buy Sell looking?
Really just something that was north of what I was making personally. So I was like, hey, if I'm going to reach for something, I want to do something where I'm going to take that next step and then grow it. And so at the time, I had just done 300,000 in earnings for the year. So I was looking for something above that.
Okay.
And I really didn't do them
before the SBA debt or after the SBA debt.
This was,
you would have wanted to take home 300.
I wanted to take home 300. I knew that I ran the analysis into the debt, and I was comfortable with, 150, because after SBA day, 50% of that would go to service the debt. So I was comfortable with 150, knowing that my plan was the company I bought was in Fort Worth. So that's on the west side of the Metroplex. And so me living in Dallas, I was like, okay, I'm going to look for another smaller plumbing company to merge with or buy to kind of start to roll up at the time. Now I know that now, but roll up a business or start a platform company and within that space, and then add on the other mechanicals, electric and HVAC. And so that was my plan before having learned anything about entrepreneurship or search or ETA.
Okay. So 300,000 of SDE was your floor, with the idea being that with the SBA loan, you could see yourself going down to 150 in the short term, because then you'd look for some sort of bolt-on acquisition to quickly get revenue higher to where you wanted it to be and maybe closer to you.
Correct. Geographically. Yeah. So growing through acquisition and then organically, bringing my skill set to the table through sales, understanding, building out a sales op methodology, understanding building a customer profile, and then once you have that business plan fleshed out, attacking that and executing, which I've done for the past 15 years. And so I felt very comfortable applying that skill set to the plumbing company.
And were you looking for a trades business, or what types of businesses were you looking for? Was it always going to be plumbing that you?
No, I was looking in construction. So I guess that's how I looked at plumbing. I wanted to find. I knew enough that I wanted to find something that had assets that we could, if going to a lender, I could be loaned against. And so, looking for construction, like excavation companies, dirt removal, demolition. I got didn't have clear direction there. My main driver there was my kid. My oldest son loved Tonka trucks and all the excavators. And so I was like, all right, this is something I could buy this, step in, buy it, and then hand it off to my oldest son, and something that he's interested in. And so to this day, I'm like, so that was short lived. And so we have all of this stuff in containers out there, and we need to hand off to another kid. But so that's what got me started down the road. Found started with construction. I was like, hey, let's look in construction. I like that space. I have friends. I have a network that's in that space already, from real estate to development within the area. So I could, whatever that looked like, masonry. I knew there was different subcategories that I could plug into. And so I found the plumbing company. Thought that I needed to be a plumber. I was like, so I never asked the question. So let's ask the question, do I need to be a plumber? And so looked at the numbers, the financials, like, this is legit. And this was before the cost of goods sold skyrocketed post-COVID. So all of the gross margins and then the EBITDA SDE margins look great. And so, like, this is before we even add on any additional acquisitions or really beef up the sales efforts. So the last 3 years that he was trending up and to the right, went from 700 and just call it to $1 million to 1.2, 1.25 in revenue. And so he ended up with doing around 35% profit margins each one of those years. So business was primarily commercial new builds, de novo work, project based with some service tied to it, which was an area for opportunity to expand and grow the business too. Start, recruit new plumbers to bring on board, bring on new trucks, and start advertising and so capturing some of that share.
Yeah.
So,
and how old was the business and how many employees?
So the business was started in 2011. They had 5 employees, 2 of which were master plumbers. So, in hindsight, I could have given both of them equity to continue on in that operation. But like most sellers do, they decided he wanted to keep the sale of the company confidential, which totally made sense. But
so 5 employees plus the seller, or he was the seller.
So 5 employees plus the seller. Great group of guys that to this day that I'd go into battle with at any juncture. So it was unfortunate the way things happened the way they did, but didn't need a plumber to buy the company. Ran that through the banks at the time, and so we were going down a convention. Let me back up. So before I even found the company, I did a pre-qualification. I got a pre-qualification letter from the SBA, and was looking for opportunities. That was part of my buy box too. So something that I could buy with SBA funding. Yeah. And then I could leverage my 401k. And this was before I was aware of what ROBs were. So it didn't even utilize ROBs. We just took a straight withdrawal from our 401ks to fund the business.
And what is the penalty to do that? Do you know offhand?
I think it was a 10%. You get taxed 10% if you don't repay it. So,
okay.
So we were willing to take that hit.
Yeah. Okay. So 35% margins on 1.25 million is what, 380-ish thousand of SDE, the most recent year. Great. With 5 employees. Skipping ahead a little bit, I've already teased this to say that the partnership ended up being the big problem here, a partner that we're about to hear about. But it sounds like the business small but solid, and in fact, you found that to be true, even once you became owner. I mean, you still look back fondly at the team.
Absolutely, even the seller too. So he stayed on for. So we haven't gotten to the terms of the deal, but yeah, even the seller, we clicked as well from a rapport standpoint right out the gate, and then everyone that had been, which made sense that I got along so well with the other guys because they'd been with him since the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so tell us about the terms of the deal and why was the seller selling?
The seller was moving to Florida. He was relocating, was trying to sell it. So need to take those funds, and he's going to start a plumbing business and he's going to start even general contracting in the Florida, kind of the 30A area. So that's the reason why he was selling. The business, he he was asking 1.8 for it. We ended up negotiating down. He did a 3-year average. I got him down to 1.4. And after the line of credit and 100,000 in working capital, the total deal was 1.6.
Okay. So 1.6 on a little less than 400 of SDE in the most recent year, not the blended 3-year average. It would be quite a bit lower.
Correct.
But if we take the most recent year, so it's a little bit over north of a 4X.
A little bit too. And I felt comfortable doing that, knowing that I could, with the expansion plan that I had, that I kind of laid out, I felt comfortable with that, with the multiple. And this is without even knowing what that a 3 to 4X multiple was kind of the landing space to be.
Yeah.
And so, he had other offers from private equity at the time too, to go for a lot larger dollar amount, but he cared a lot about the guys and wanted to sell to the right individual that would keep, maintain his legacy and keep his team in place.
And so what was your pitch to him about that? Why did he like you versus PE, for example?
Yeah, so just talk to him about myself and my background. That I was an ex-college athlete and was competitive. He played baseball, so we connected there. And so we both applied our competitive nature to business. Mine as a W-2 employee, him as a business owner.
Yeah.
He was also an employee, as a plumber, starting out, just running service, and he stepped out on his own as an entrepreneur. So we just connected there, and I, admired his courage and to step out and do that. And so I outlined my plan for the business to kind of grow across the Metroplex, starting with using his business as the platform, and then we would expand into the north, south, and east of Dallas, and eventually roll up. So talking to him, that through those relationships, expanding just on plumbing alone, but then layering in, like we talked to, electrical, and then HVAC. So 1.6.
And so you took out at what, 160, 150, 60 from your 401k?
Yeah, roughly. Yeah, 165, and I actually took out 180 total from our 401k, just to have to cover some of our I guess the search costs, and then some of our initial startup costs as well. So, but ended up doing 10% down, which was 160, and then he carried out 10% seller note as well.
Okay, so very conventional 10-10 SBA sort of situation. Great. And then you, despite the fact that you didn't need to be a plumber to buy a plumbing business, how did you feel about the fact that this is still a very technical business and you didn't have any of that knowledge? And by the way, what did the seller say to you about that fact? He, of course, was a plumber, was a master plumber.
Yeah, no, he admitted that there's going to be a learning curve where that was concerned, but then he also went back to the fact that he would still be around and I could call him if I had any questions. His day-to-day, he had stepped back from being from day-to-day, just actually kind of doing the work, strictly going out and bidding the projects. And so he's like, within 6 months, you watching me do this, you'll be able to go out and bid these projects. And so that's that learning curve. He's like, I'm confident you'll be able to do that. So, and then for better or worse, I'll just always feel like whatever the situation is, I can step into and I'll be able to navigate the learning curve. And I've done it in my professional career to that point, learning Japanese eyewear manufacturing, and having never been in healthcare and medical device sales, and feeling comfortable going in and talking to neurosurgeons about their procedures and utilizing our equipment and talking about the features and benefits, and then ultimately just using my intangibles and being able to build, foster, and grow relationships with other, as it relates to this business, with GCs, other remodelers, and quite frankly, other small plumbing operations where they weren't able to get the work done, and they would kind of refer business back and forth to each other. So I just felt comfortable stepping into really any situation. And then I like the fact that this was as plumbing and a lot of the mechanicals are, it's a kind of a necessity. And as we learned through COVID, it was I forget the term at the time we called it, but
essential.
Essential
service.
As essential services. Yep. So
And
yeah,
what were you? How is this going to play with your W-2? Were you going to quit your W? I mean, you said you were going to quit your W-2. That's why you needed the replacement money, but you never actually did. So how were you thinking about that?
yeah. At the time, the plan was to keep my W-2, and so I'm not having to tap into the funds, executing the growth strategy. Um, Within the first 6 months, we would add on additional units to the fleet and hire on additional plumbers. In our pre-sale and conversations leading up to to closing, he had several plumbers in the pipeline that were looking for work, and that he said we could willingly add on. He was turning down a lot of business from as it relates to service, and so we could easily add on one truck and one service plumber to grow our revenue base. And so um, that was just step one from a growth stand, organically growing the business. And so yeah, from there.
But your approach had shifted because initially you did think you'd quit your job, or did I misunderstand?
No, I was going to keep my job as long as I could, and then once the business was big enough to support me, then I would transition over full time and then fully lean into it. But the situation came, and it's like, all right, so I found my partner. We can dive into that in a little bit. I felt comfortable with that strategy. The SBA at the time was not requiring that I have a plumber on the business, and so the business was stable enough on my own, back with my business experience and expertise at that time. They were ready to move forward. And so I really don't understand what happened at the SBA. Maybe there's a new person that came in that was looking over the paperwork, but in the final moments leading up to closing, they were like, "Hey, we would feel a little bit more comfortable if there were someone on the capital stack that had a master plumbing license." So massive curveball. And they told us, so we found the business in late June, early July. We were ready to close. We would have closed in a couple of months. We were ready to close towards the end of August, and that's when they threw that kind of curveball at us. And
this is 2020. This is peak.
This is 2020, peak COVID. Yep. And so I'm getting updated financials. Business is still, it's an essential business. Business was remaining kind of solid, and actually he had a couple of new jobs come in. So the business was looking good, despite all the things that were going on in COVID. So we get that curveball, and so we start looking. He has friends. He's like, hey, he started recommending people outside of the company that I could potentially bring on and partner with, and so I started having those conversations. And I remembered we had since moved from Carrollton to Rockwall. DFW listeners will understand that. So just moved about 30 minutes east. New church, but I remembered going to church and through a marriage program with a plumber. And so, we kind of hit it off and had a decent rapport. I knew he was up there in age. He was in his late 60s and probably looking at retirement. So at the time, I think he was working for Roto-Rooter. And then when I contacted him, he had started his own plumbing company and was trying to build this is his own words, he was trying to build what the seller had already established at the time. He just wasn't able to break into that commercial plumbing space. And so somewhat successful, one man in a truck, kind of teetered up and down between one and two. He had two trucks that he brought in with the deal, but just never could get to that space. It wasn't even a huge leap, but he was 3x of whatever he was doing at the time. And so seemed like
he
a great
seems
opportunity.
Perfect. He wants what you got, and you need his license. And timing is right. I mean, well, he's not going to be in it for the super long term because he's already a little bit up in age. But it seems like it's what he wants right now, at least for a number of years. And you know him through your church, which kind of gives him some social validation, you'd think.
So you think, right? So again, he was on. His horizon was kind of on the end. He's like, step in here, next 5 years, next to 5 to 10 years, we grow the scale of the business. Plan was to always pay down the debt early and move on. And so he would step back and then have an equity piece in the company. And so from that platform company, he would always, that'll be part of it. And as an investment for him, and it would be part of his retirement plan.
Gotcha.
And at the time, so I'm looking at relooking at the financials. I'm like, all right, we can support, with me not taking the salary, we can afford to pay him full time to come on. And so that's what we did. I was planning to be there once a week because I had some bandwidth with my W-2 job. to help manage things. And so there wasn't a huge need to go out and get new business. We just needed to maintain what was there. Really, for the next, even if we didn't add on his trucks or bring on anybody else, the business would have supported. If everything remained flat, it would have supported him and it supported servicing the debt. So everything looked good from that standpoint. The one thing but he was adamant about. I offered. I was like, listen, I found this opportunity. How do you feel about a 60-40 split? He's like, anything that's not 50-50, I'm out on.
Wow. That's
so
bold.
I was like, okay, I'm going to have to think about it. Yeah.
Did that strike you as bold, as greedy, or whatever the word, aggressive?
No, at the time, I was just thinking, I was looking at the silver, like I was not looking at the downside. I was always looking at the upside. I was like, all right, fine, 50-50. He's also, so add in this part of the story too, he's also licensed HVAC technician here in Texas as well. So instantly able to add on, in my mind, the HVAC piece. He's got 2 trucks. We just staff up plumbers and HVAC. And so now we're adding in those 2 additional revenue streams. And so he's going to shut down his business. And so he's like, yeah, I got a couple things I need to do. And I didn't drill him on that, what that looked like. In hindsight, I should have looked at his financials, should have done a background check on him. It's a key lesson I learned today. It was reiterated today in my men's group, but it's trust but verify. You can feel super great about the situation and the prospects, but hey, let's do our due diligence. And I guess I really didn't understand what due diligence was at the moment. I just look at the financials, make sure that the P&L matched up with the bank accounts, which it did. Ran it through. I have 2 friends of mine, really good CPAs, that looked at the financials, and everything looked good to them too. Ran them through the financial modeling, and it made sense. It almost was like too good to be true. And I know this now. It's like, okay, what could the downside be? What if this goes south? What does that look like? And we never, to my detriment, I never did that. We never sat back. All right, what does this look like if things don't work out? Of all the contingencies, if something happens, if either one of us get hit by a bus, what does our exit strategy look like on the negative side and on the positive side? And so eventually I would take over the company on the positive side, and then, he'd ride off I'd cash him out and he'd ride off into the sunset. That was my plan. But never got there.
Yeah. Okay. And so his insistence on 50-50 was just is what it is. That's just what he was negotiating. And
yeah, he's like, hey, you need a master plumber. I bring all of my, 20, 30 years of experience with me. He's like, I'm not taking anything less than 50%. And so, yeah, at the time I didn't think of it, and I didn't consult with or ask about other. I also went back to him a couple of different times. Like, all right, what if we did 51-49? Was our distribution would still be 50%, 50-50? And he was absolutely not. His wife, she's pretty savvy, ex AT&T employee. The equity was what was important to them, and then having a say in the decision making process. And so, we just didn't have a solid operating agreement on when we would clash or have disagreements on how to run the business. And so,
so did you have an operating agreement prepared? It just was a thin one, or did you skip that altogether?
It was extremely thin. I found it on Rocket Law or maybe LegalZoom. Went through, and and this is one of the other learnings that I should have stuck with one of my attorneys, even though I didn't have a relationship with him. We went with his attorney, which he had a long-standing relationship with, which should have been another red flag, because he had an attorney that he's utilized on multiple fronts for his business and for personal reasons. So I should have dug into that a lot more too. But I found out about a lot of those cases and pending cases after we closed. And so again, things I would have found out during diligence, or just a simple background check that would have given me pause. And we could have maintained our friendship at the time. I was like, I'm just going to move in a different direction, and completely walked away from the deal, which is what I probably should have done at that time, because I did not have any other sources for a master plumber. The ones that were referred to me by the seller, we couldn't get that. He wanted the same things. 20% equity, even 30% equity wasn't palatable for him. So,
Who? Sorry,
And
for
I
whom?
honestly, I didn't feel good giving someone more than that to someone I didn't know. It was someone the seller knew. I just didn't understand. I couldn't get my arms and
I
wrap my
see.
head around giving him
Yeah.
someone, just an unknown entity, even though in hindsight, I didn't know my eventual partner that well either, but I just couldn't wrap my head around giving someone I didn't know that much equity.
Yeah.
So,
well, and if this was all happening in 2020, if this had happened in 2023, you might have been able to structure the SBA rules changed in 2023 into partial ownership. You might have been able to work with the seller to have him retain some small percentage of the business, and his license stays in the business. Now, if he's moving states, maybe that wouldn't have worked anyway, and maybe he wouldn't have wanted it. He wouldn't have wanted any sort of tail to the business, but that structure comes up a lot now these days, 3 years later.
Yeah, I've listened to several of your previous guests that have done that, and so that would have been very beneficial.
Would that have worked in your case?
1,000%. Yeah, he already was willing to put up 10% of his own, or carry 10% of the note as well, so we could have easily negotiated, a retained equity situation where he's 20-25% ownership, and then shortly after the fact too, he had family issues that were requiring him to stay put here, and so he was doing other odd jobs. Well, he had $1 million check from the sale of his business, so he's fine. But it delayed his move to Florida. So, had we done that, had I known that he was going to stay there, we could have easily partnered. I could have stepped in from a business development standpoint, started learning the trade. Essentially, too, and this is kind of, I was going to get my plumber's license. I guess technically I'm still a plumber's apprentice. I haven't kept it up. But my goal was too, I wanted to learn the trade too. So if something came back, why not? I'm on the job with my guys, with the team. I can learn this business. I'm clocking hours. I can get my plumber's license too. And so I think in hindsight, I think that was one of the selling points too for my partner at the time too. He's an older guy. Just kind of sideways with his family back east. And I think at some point he saw me as some kind of a son and was willing to hand down his trade to someone else that he could, pass that on to in kind of weird, twisted way. And so, and we were friends, right? So I was like, yeah, teach me how to plumb, teach me the trade. So something I could do on my back. But so quickly into it, we closed that December of 2020. We should have, in hindsight too, waited until January to do just a clean, from a tax standpoint, just a clean start. But also probably would have cleared up a lot of AR issues too. And so closed 2020. I think December 19th was the day of 2020. Go through the holidays, celebrating closing that business, feeling really good and optimistic about things and transitioning things over. We did a stock sale, so we kept the name of the business, which was named after the seller, which I intended on changing eventually. I wasn't going to do that within the first 6 months. I knew enough. I don't know where I got it from, but not to do any major changes in the first 6 months. And so I wasn't going to change the name. His name carried a ton of weight and social capital in the space, and so eventually, once I became a known entity, I could have transitioned to a different name that wasn't tied to an individual. Because even then, my goal was to buy and hold and scale, but at the end, I always left the possibility open to flip the business as well. And that's one of the selling points I told my partner. I was like, listen, if we don't do anything and we grow this business, if we stay flat, it's on a high note. If we stay flat in the next 5 years, we'll be able to have a liquidity event and have arbitrage of 2x here. If we don't do anything. So that was, the bank knew that. It was always on the back table, on the back burner to do that as well. But again, we weren't able to keep it flat.
A couple minutes ago, you were talking about due diligence and the diligence that you did on the business, which was light, but it wasn't nothing. You looked at the numbers yourself, and you had a couple of CPA friends looking at it. And as we know, what went wrong here was not that the business was a lemon. It was a solid business. It was your partnership, which we're just about to get to. But you didn't diligence your partner, is what I thought you were going to say. And correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct.
But you definitely didn't do much diligence. So reflecting back, how could you have diligenced him better for people who are contemplating bringing on a partner that they frankly don't know well?
Yeah, I've got a really good friend of mine that's in Austin that does. I should have just done a simple background check on him and just looked at it. Yeah, and then I could have asked him, and maybe he could have explained some of the things that came up on his background checks. We ultimately did, post close, because we quickly got into a legal situation. So a lot of those red flags I could have asked him about and quickly walked away. And it's like, hey, I just don't think this is the right fit.
And the background check would have revealed whatever that would have revealed would have been red flags. I mean, can you tell us what they are or not?
Yeah, there was one situation where, and he actually told me about it post-close. He's like, I didn't want to bring this up and kind of scare you off. And so there was a situation where there was an assault, an assault accusation, and it was legal. There's a legal trail for it. And we live in America, you're innocent until proven guilty. And so the case was I think it got thrown out on a technicality.
Mm-hmm.
But it lends himself to the behavior that he exhibited, after, shortly after we close, and like, all right, this is consistent with who he is.
Yeah. And if you had seen that, you would have walked in advance.
I think so. Yeah, it would. Yeah. That was a big red flag. And then the inability for him to scale an operation on his own, that should have been a red flag too. I'm like, why weren't you able to do this on your own? And so it was a red flag that I was willing. I'm like, okay, maybe that's not his skill set. He's the technician. He can turn the wrench. He is not good at building relationships, clearly, and that's where I could step in. And so, but
that wasn't. I don't think that was crazy, Josh. That's something. For example, you see a lot in tech land, startup land, where the product genius, the engineer, isn't good at the business side of things or the people side of things. And so you bring in the business guy and you pair that with the technical person, and it's a great pairing. And so it sounds like that was kind of your vision here. You were going to be the front of the house, the sales guy, the leader, the people person, the business visionary, and he was going to be the technical guy. So that doesn't strike me as, that seems like a good match. No,
I think you're spot on. In theory, theoretically, right? That was the vision.
And Josh, what about what you took as positive signals, namely that he was in your social network, kind of, sort of, because he was part of your church? In retrospect, do you think that did signal anything, or does that really not signal anything? So for the listener who might be thinking about partnering with somebody from their church or some other connection they have, or just their social network, did that end up being worth anything, really, or was that a false positive?
I think no. To this, I don't think I would have done anything differently there. I was using church as a kind of a checkpoint.
Yeah.
Because listen, we've all sinned and fallen short, of the glory, and we all have our flaws, and so. And honestly, even his ability, even though he did it after the fact, is like, hey, I've had these missteps. Like, you know what? We're all imperfect individuals, and so like, all right, let's turn the page on that and move forward. Whatever reason it was that you weren't able to grow your enterprise to the point, okay, let's put those on the table and address it and move forward. I think, I guess if I'm a listener looking out, I would just trust but verify. Like, I have a great relationship with someone from my small group from church. Let's walk through this. Okay, we think this could work, but what if it doesn't? Let's maintain our relationship. Let's maintain our friendship. Let's figure out, let's just say it's nothing that anything happens here, the market turns. And so how do we exit this together? And so outlining that strategy was like, hey, I want to move in a different direction. It happens all the time with partners. Like, something happens, divorce, illness, shiny object syndrome. And so what in that situation, hey, I want to focus now on my e-commerce business now. What does that look like? And so how do we exit here? And so figuring out those points and like, okay. And then going, even if it gets to the legal standpoint, we can quickly hammer those things out and like, all right, this is how we're going to transition out of the business, either partner. So just outlining those things. Absolutely. I would do business with someone from church again. Absolutely. I would just make sure that, you do your due diligence, make sure that those red flags aren't there. And then have a clear operating agreement that outlines what the exit strategy looks like.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just double down on a few of those things. So obviously, strength of operating agreement between partners is hugely important. A good attorney will press you partners to have that uncomfortable conversation. Like there's always that moment where you need to have an uncomfortable conversation with a new partner of like, if this fails, go sideways, whatever, or if we just want to dissolve the partnership for whatever reason, if we just want to go our separate ways, how are we going to do that? And there are some best practices there. There's some standards. There's the so-called the buy-sell agreement, or I think it's also called a shootout, something. So people can Google that. But fundamentally, your attorney can make themselves a good attorney will press you to do this process and will kind of, be the awkward one to bring it up, be the one to bring it up, because neither of you, when you're starting a new partnership, everyone wants to be positive and happy about the future and the prospects, and neither party wants to say, well, let's talk about what this looks like in the worst possible case. Let's talk about the divorce. What does a divorce here look like? So a good attorney will press you to do it and bring it up. They'll step in to prompt that conversation. So yeah. Anyway,
and speaking of attorneys,
stuff.
Will, if I could jump in here real quick,
yeah.
As far as I didn't diligence his attorney either, and so he ended up not being licensed in the state of Texas, and so
okay,
it was problematic too. And so licensed in Maryland, operating in Texas, it was a lot. So he ended up causing more problems, and so he was part of we ran the operating agreement through him, and so he wasn't having a good attorney. Is key, absolutely, because with the good attorney, who's my business divorce attorney, he's a good friend of mine. Yeah, he was like, next time, these are the guys you need to talk to. They can absolutely put together a solid operating agreement, and will lead you down the road to your point to like, hey, let's talk about this uncomfortable outcome. We have to be open to each side. Like, yep, we want a mitigated success and then a mitigated failure. And so what does that look like, and how do we exit that? So
right. Well, and of course, everybody doing this, depending on what their own balance sheet looks like, resources are concerned. But I mean, there might be as many as 3 lawyers involved. Either both parties, both partners should maybe have their own counsel, and then there is the attorney representing, who writes the operating agreement, who is neutral. And presents the operating agreement to you guys, and then you each have your own attorneys to review and help you think through that operating agreement. Which each person's got their own attorney, and then collectively you're paying the business attorney. It's a lot, but that would probably be the absolute safest way to approach it.
So definitely, you had more time.
You had a lot of trust. You had a lot of trust, Josh. You had a lot of trust in him. You had a lot of trust in, I guess, mostly in him. It seems like you didn't have as much trust in the business. You tried to diligence that, but in him you had a lot of trust in his attorney, or his selection or use of his attorney.
I did, and I think part of that too was we were towards the end. We were at the end, and this could have happened with quality of earnings too, but just not wanting to put the cap this is just one less expense we have to pay for. If I pay for my attorney, which I should have just paid for my attorney. Yeah, I was trying to manage my costs there. We were already at the finish line. In retrospect, I should have just paid the whatever it was, $3, $2, $5,000 for somebody that was representing my interests, to make sure that we were legally covered, no matter whichever way the pendulum swung during the course of the business operation. So,
well, you're not the first, Josh, to try to save money in a transaction. And end up being exposed in ways that you later wish you weren't. It's a very strong temptation, because legal fees, quality of earnings fees are steep, and people want to avoid doing them, but want to avoid spending them, especially because they're, typically in a search, you've already been spending money. If you've been doing a full-time search, you've been foregoing your income because you've quit to go search for a business. So the temptation is quite strong. But you'd be wise to resist that temptation, listener. All right. Back to the story. January, you're now partnered. What happens next?
Yeah, so it's January. It's winter. I guess it's winter everywhere, but winter in Dallas, and most people in the Northeast or up north don't think it gets cold here. It gets cold in Dallas. And so we operated through January, just a lot of transition things. And so we get to the beginning of February and we get a freeze. And so they're more common now. And with the freeze, the roads freeze over. I've been in here 20 years, but when it rains hard in Texas, traffic becomes unbearable. So snow and ice makes it even worse. So people are staying home. They're just not used to living in cold climates. And so when it drops below freezing, pipes burst, which creates an opportunity. And there are a lot of smaller plumbing companies out there that were taking advantage of customers. We did charge an emergency fee, but it was reasonable and in line with everyone else's. And so it was a lot for a small, at the time, 5-7-man plumbing operation, including everybody to manage, especially for someone we're trying to transition a new business. And so the old seller's there too. And so he's there every day. So the old team's still looking to him for guidance and direction, and still trying to look to my partner and me for direction. All right, who do we listen to here? And so at that point, I'm like, hey, let's just listen to the seller. Like, this is we're going to follow your lead here. Let's maximize the situation, help as many customers as we can. But at the same time, we have to take care of our bread and butter, which was one of the other red flags of this business too, was just key customer concentration issues in addition to the key man risk. Things that again, we've talked about it too, but I think I would have felt comfortable going into because we were similar personalities, and I felt the transition with his help I would have been able to transition those relationships. And after closing, that would have absolutely been the case. Having talked to each and every one of them, they told me that, listen, if it's just you find a new partner or find someone else to handle the plumbing side, it's like, we'll continue to do business with you. And these are new contractors too that were coming on board. And they just got sideways with my partner on different issues that related to plumbing. And so, it's so.
Well, sorry, Josh. So
Sure.
During the freeze, but the seller's still around helping you guys, and your approach is to get out there and service customers, and then what happens with your new partner?
Yeah, so it's kind of a crazy time. The phone's ringing off the hook. The phone, it wasn't like somebody sitting there. You think of Betty or Ben, whoever, somebody sitting there answering calls all day. It was a cell phone. He ran the business from a cell phone, which we transitioned that number to a new phone. And so, we're all scrambling. I'm the only one that can't really go out and help anybody in a pinch. So it's like, hey, let me take the calls and just be intake and triage all the calls. Well, that was a point of contention with him. He's like, well, you don't understand what they're calling and talking about. I'm like, well, I can understand what the problem is and have them call one of the 5. Really, we had journeyman plumbers there too, and any one of you to kind of figure this out. But I can take all the calls back and we can call them back. Yeah. So, but he wanted to take.
Was that the first inkling that he was not going to be that it was going to be so much friction with him?
It was before that, I think. Like, we ran January, we were like, it was a slow January, so we ended up running at a loss for like $2,000, which was not a lot when you look at our monthly churn. And so I'm like, all right, yeah, we could fix this here, and here. Printed out the P&L to him, and I guess it was like looking at Chinese, and he was like, oh, it's like he kind of fell back in his chair. It's like, oh, it's like a red fox. Like, oh, I can't believe it's the big one. He's like, I need my wife here to run all this. I'm like, we don't need her here. I'm like, this is what the problem is. Like, we cut costs here. We all of a sudden our costs for whatever reason got out of control here. Let's start monitoring that a little bit closer. Let's get these jobs executed in time so we can get paid on them, and we'll be fine. But I'm like, okay. At the time, I'm like, all right, fine. You need to talk to your wife. I'm fine. We let her give her opinion. And so she sent out an email. So like, great, let's bring her on. The first email was like a long laundry list of things. Like, are we doing this, and this? And I'm like, oh, listen, I'm not a kindergartner when it relates to business. I don't need, your input is respected, but I didn't need it. It just became too much. And so, but she's in it. She's involved. She's managing his email. So it wasn't like she's at home. Like, I would get emails from him. It was from her. And so it just became a lot. And so during the freeze, we're missing out on opportunities. I have the phone. We really don't agree on that. I'm like, listen, it doesn't make sense for you to take calls when you're out in the field helping customers. So that became the first point of contention, like the serious
He
point of
wanted
contention.
to. He wanted to
So
take
I
all
had
the calls.
phone. He called me. He's like threatening this, like, listen, you don't give me that phone, I'm threatening to sue you. He's like, you don't know me, like cussing me, like, I'm keeping it PG here, but it's like laying into me verbally, like laying into me, like something. And this is when he flipped. I'm like, wow. I'm like, all right, this is who you are. I'm like, this is how you're going to handle stress. Like, I really did not like. Now I see why you weren't able to build a team around you, because
Wow.
nobody wants to be around that. And so, like, we can like this. This is a lot. This is a stressful situation, but we're going to get through it. And you need somebody at the helm that's not cracking up at the first sign of, discomfort in running a business. And so,
and Josh, when he starts revealing his character to you, does your stomach drop? Are you like, oh no, what have I done?
Yeah, I'm like, how did I get into this? I'm like, and this is untenable. I'm like, this is not. I'm talking to the attorney, like his attorney. I'm like, I'm recording some of the phone calls. I'm like, listen, this is not normal. Like, I'm not going to put up with this. And so at this point, I'm like, we're looking at the calendar now, February. Like, it's just more and more there. So he brings a gun to work, and then, it's
what?
Texas. Yeah. It's Texas, so people have handguns. I have mine too. I had it in the glove box. I brought it in. We were talking. It's like part of the conversation, right? Well, I take my gun and go home with it. He leaves his on the desk, and so we get into it. And so I'm like, it to the point of contention. Like I'll tell you, he almost got into blows. I did get into blows with one of the plumbers that we had. I'd since left the business to let him run it, but at that time, I felt like his verbal threats, and with him having a gun on the desk, I'm like, I don't need to be there. So I'm like, you run the situation. Like, we're not getting along here, and I'm not going to put myself in a situation to where you fly off the handle and there's a gun laying on your desk. So,
my God,
it was. I just couldn't believe.
That's crazy.
It was nuts, and I was like, I can't believe this is the situation I'm in. I've emptied out my 401k. I'm like, I sat and talked with we had our Monday morning meetings. I'm like, this is not working. Like, I want to give you an opportunity to get out. You can go ahead and leave. We'll figure out some kind of stuff, but you being here is not healthy. It's toxic for the business. I'll let you can go run your old company. The seller says, yeah, we're not, we're sat down there with him. Like, listen, I can help him through this. You don't necessarily need to be here. You're a reason why a lot of the contractors that we're working with don't want to work with you anymore. It's better for the business if you can just hand things off to Josh, and I'll help him with the plumbing part. Nope, I'm not going anywhere. And so I don't know what to do. So I called my friend who's a lawyer who does business breakups all the time. And so he's like, send me all your documentation. So I send them the closing documents. I send them our operating agreement, which he quickly tells me, like, he's like, who did this for you? I was like, I raised my hand. I was like, I did. Rocket Law. Typed in. He's like, this is bad. So he's like, we could have avoided a lot if you were just 51% ownership. We could have ejected him from the company and brought in someone else on the loan at a lower equity rate and equity percentage. And so, but anyway, with hindsight, we were stuck. Bad operating agreement. We're in this. And so I'm like, all right, I just want my initial capital back. He can have the company. And so we go back and forth. He's like, he had this notion that the seller gave me the money up front to pay for the company, in which I was like, what? Like, no, this is my money. Here's my statements. This is the withdrawals. Here's statements from the bank. The dollar amounts match up. These are my bank accounts. These are the 401k statements. These are our funds. This is pretty black and white. Nope. The seller gave you the money. He was not hearing any other explanation. So I just couldn't reason with him on the simplest of things. I was like, you can have the company. I just want my money back. And I probably fought too long trying to get my funds back. In hindsight, I should have walked away from the $180,000, just call it $200,000, and just went back to, the drawing board. But
why do you feel that way? Because I mean, that was your retirement, so it does seem like that'd be worth fighting for. Was there a cost to fighting for it eventually?
Yeah, it was. So I didn't take out the full amount. There was still, I think I used 50% of it at the time. So I hadn't, at that time I'm 40. I'm just turned 40. So I'm like, I didn't have the 401k that a lot of people had. And so, like, you know what? That's fine. Like, I'm at the peak earning positions now. I can go back and rebuild my 401k again.
Yeah.
And that's in hindsight, like I can walk away from that. Versus doing what I had to do, which was file Chapter 7 to protect my house and all of our other assets. And so Chapter 7 versus getting my, or walking away from my capital injection, it would have been
but you
a
still,
no-brainer.
but walking away, you still would have had to pay down the SBA loan.
No, so we negotiated that he was going to take on the loan. I would have walked away from the company. He was going to take over the debt service. Him and his wife were going to take it over. I was like, fine, you guys think you can run this better than I can with me involved? Have at it. And so that decision was quickly made in March of 2021. It's like, you guys can run it. So they ran it. Him and his wife, they ran it with the seller's help as best as he could. But I mean, he ran off employees. He ran off more contractors. He wasn't able to bring on any new business. So the company ran into the ground. And so I find out towards the end of the year that he hadn't been servicing the debt. So because the business was being run so poorly. And so at that point, I'm like, we haven't been able to close. I'm like, all right, he's not leaving. I was prepared to, all right, if he's not going to leave, I'm going to leave. My lawyers, we've got lawyers involved. That's why I said, it's kind of a catch-22. Like, yeah, if you do lawyers on the front end, it could elongate the closing process, but at the same time, you'd be covered. And so, anyway, I should have in retrospect, I should have done the lawyers up front, and then we would have had a clear exit on the back end. So we did lawyers.
There's some
on the back
cliche
end.
there where it's like you're going to pay for lawyers one way or the other, and it's better to pay for them at the beginning than at the end, something like that.
There is. Yeah. And I wish I could remember what it was, but yeah. So anyway. Ended up paying for him. In the end, I ended up paying $50,000 to an attorney trying to get out of this situation. So if I would have even paid 10% of that up front, we could have potentially avoided it. So,
and what were you doing from March to December while he's busy running the business into the ground, and you've retained your job? So you're doing your job, but how involved with the business are you, if at all?
Yeah. So we closed on the business. I kept my job, but I quickly realized in January I needed to be there full time. So I left my job full time, with the intention of just going. I burned the bridge. Let's go all in here and make this work. Let's add on. You've got he was already bringing in 2 trucks, so we didn't have to deploy capital to bring that. We just needed to hire new plumbers and/or HVAC guys to start doing some of the work that was already there with existing customers. So I'm like, let's just go. I'm like, I ripped the Band-Aid off. I'm like, took the golden handcuffs off. I'm like, let's go. And with a better operating agreement in place, we would have been fine. I could have moved on from him, installed one of the 2 master plumbers that they already had, which are great guys, which 1,000% deserve that opportunity to have equity and be in alignment with their efforts. And personally with their efforts and personally, and then have a stake in the exit or whatever that looks like, or just the upside in the operation of the business in general. But that wasn't the case. And so we're there, and within 45 days, I'm like, that's when all of that happened with the gun, him cussing me out, just second guessing me, belittling me in front of the other employees. It was an awful situation. And so I'm like, you can have it, you run with it. And that's where we're there. So during that time, my old company, I'd already left. And then my company came back there, hey, yeah, we still have your position here. So I was able to get back in full time with my old job, and which I needed to support and pay for their lawyers and then keep food on the table. So with that, I was able to do both of those and start to build back my 401k.
Great. So from March to December, you're basically working your shop, and life has returned to normal. Your professional life has returned to normal. Of course, you have your ear to the ground as to what's going on in the business, or no? At some point, do you just kind of wipe your hands of it and aren't really thinking about it anymore?
I still had access to, I was still paying a couple bills. I had access to QuickBooks, and so I could, I was still do payroll. I was still sending. He didn't know how to do that, so his wife didn't want to get involved and do that. So I was still doing payroll. A couple of guys needed paper checks, so I'd drive out to Fort Worth, hang out with the guys, give them their paychecks, keep a pulse of what's going on, and like just talking to me, I'm like, man, like I don't know how much longer I can do this, but they were tied there too because this was how they were earning a living, and so one guy left. He went out and stepped out on his own. A couple of them were really close there, and
they eventually handed reacting. Off. Gary,
what's that?
How did the seller react to all this situation? Because he remains active in the business because his move to Florida, you said, was suspended. So what is he? How's he reacting to this horrible person coming in and running the business that he built while he's still there?
He was having a completely different experience with the my partner at the time. Initially, he's like, I'm getting along with him great. He's not treating me like that, but he's like, the moment that he does, he's like, I don't know that I could take how he's been treating you. He's like, I would have been in jail already. So, but that
maybe that assault charge from your partner was actually somebody assaulting him.
Yeah. So he's like, man, he's like, it's wild just the way he just does not get it. He doesn't understand. Older guy, he's having the print offs, and so we're trying to kind of quote out these jobs, and like, so the seller and I were able to look at it on a screen here. He's actually going to Kinko's or Staples and printing out these huge plans to quote jobs that we may not even get. Where the seller was like, hey, I can show you how to do this. This is what this looks like. Uses the formula. I'm like, oh, I've got this. I was like, I can do this part, even though, and I may come to you for questions, but I can do this part.
Yeah.
Without having to go and spend money to print out every single plan. And even his wife was like, you don't know what it's like at home. He's got all these plans spread out all over the house. Like, he was in over his head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it was commercial plumbing versus the residential service, which he was used to. So
not to defend his behavior, but that probably does help explain his terrible behavior, is that he was panicking.
Yeah, I think so. And so, yeah, pressure busts pipes, right? To use a bad pun, in the plumbing for a plumbing company. And so I don't know how you diligence that, is trying to figure out how he handles pressure other than talking to other people, ex-employers. So that's the diligence process I talked about. I was like, hey, like, I'm going into business with this guy. Like, just what was your experience with him? Just a simple question like that, 5-minute phone call, maybe could have uncovered a lot of that. But no, we just got to that point where I'm at home, I'm working, he's running the business there, and he hasn't shut down his company. So he's got his company that he was like, he's like, I'll shut that down within the first month or two. I'm like, okay, well, we're fast forwarding towards the middle of 2021 and he's still running his company. There's still, and he said there were mistakes where he ended up meant to put the water heaters and all of these other fixtures on his account, but he ended up putting them on our business's account. And so, maybe he did that, maybe he didn't, but I think based on his history it looked like he was stealing from the company. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, and you never mentioned it before. He said he told us about it up front, but you never mentioned it before. Like, hey, I'm taking, like, if we'd have talked about it, it'd been fine, but he never talked about any of this stuff. I was like, yeah, we talked about that. So maybe he thought it happened in his brain, but we never had those conversations. So he was trying, and he took employees from the company and were doing jobs for his company, which we weren't experiencing the revenue on. I was like, I would have never agreed to that. And he's like, yeah, we talked about that. I'm like, no, we did not. So we talked about hiring additional people, for never hiring anyone for your company to satisfy whatever debts and ramp down that you had going on. So another thing that was not outlined in the operating agreement clearly, which I should have done, is he was like, listen, I'm partnering with you. You're going to cease and run down your operations within the first 90 days or whatever the terms are, but having clear line items on what that looks like, and him exiting his business and being fully committed to this. Which he had since I engaged him in August. He had plenty of time to ramp it down to December. That's just why I'm like, okay, why would we even need to make that part of it? You should have ramped down by the time it got to close, and he hadn't. So,
well, Josh, this is just such a nightmare. Take us now to the end of that year, and how does this nightmare start to end? So you found that he isn't even paying down the SBA loan. Go ahead. It's December.
Yeah, he's not. He's barely getting by. He'd taken out. He didn't like the fact that because I opened up a lot of the checking accounts. So he went out and opened up checking accounts through a different bank, which I did not have access to, and was running things through there, which was commingling jobs and I lost visibility of what was happening with the company. And in addition to opening new accounts, he went and took on new debt. And then so we're fast forwarded through 2021 and we're in 2022. The company is still running. We get to the end of 2022, and he's like, I can't do this anymore. He's like, I don't want this company. He's like, he's already run it into the ground. He's not servicing the debt. He's like, I don't even want it anymore. I'm like, okay. So we're going back. And so now he doesn't want the company. We're still on the hook for the SBA debt. So then what are my options here? And so I'm asking my attorney, like, what can I do here? It's like, really, you need to talk to a bankruptcy attorney at this point, to protect your whatever assets you have. And at that time, it was just my domicile in Texas, that was protected, but with SBA, that was still at risk. And so I needed to protect that. And the only way to do that was to file Chapter 7. And you asked me about the difference between 7 and 11 on the pre-call. Yeah. Just for our listeners, 7 is complete discharging of the debt. 11 is reorganizing, restructuring the debt, and continuing operations of the business, which I may have been willing to do that up front, but he was going to take the company. And so I didn't even consider that. And then at that time, he was being sued by other. Thankfully, my name wasn't, but the business was on it. So the LLC's business name was already tarnished. And there's no point in even taking. He's like, you can have it. You can have the name. He's like, I don't even want it anymore. I'm like, well, it's really nothing anymore at this point. So
he had lawsuits. He had caused lawsuits against the company in his tenure, 2 years of running the business.
Correct.
So what?
So taking out loans and not paying them. And so they put liens on some of the outstanding work that was still coming in. And he was waiting to get paid on a couple of deals that never came through. And it was always somebody else's fault. It was never his. Yeah. It's like, he never was able to look in the mirror and like say this. I'm like, and even me, I was like, listen, what could I have done differently? This was the first time in my professional career that I really haven't been able to connect with another human being and work past our differences. It was just untenable. Like, and I was like, how could I have handled this differently? And really, it's just going back to how I could have prevented it on the front end, and from a diligence standpoint. And so, yeah, we get through.
Well, he sounds like a person who's just kind of beyond. He's not somebody who's very reachable, or somebody that you can kind of resolve your differences. It sounds like he's just a combative person, and that's how he responds to everything. Not to mention other vices he has. So
yeah, and then he mentioned to me too, like when he's like, I really want to make sure that nothing happens to our friendship, because he didn't have a lot of friends, which was another red flag. And he's like, he admitted, he's like, I don't have a lot of friends. He's like, I want to make sure that we're good. Like, we're always good. I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, sounds good. Like, what could possibly break up or happen to us that would, break up this friendship, that's just kind of really forming. I'm like, but clearly there were ways for him to do that. And so it was important to him. Like, he just wasn't able to do that. So I felt sad for him too. I'm like, all right, I was a friend, potentially, a son figure where he was be able to hand down his trade and watch the business. Like, he taught me how to plumb and watch me grow a business, and he could step back in retirement and say, yep, that was his kind of capstone project on his career. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But that just didn't happen. And so I was like, I can't work in this environment. Like, it wasn't just one time. You've repeatedly verbally abused me. Like, if you can't talk to me like that as an adult, you can't talk to your customers like that. You definitely can't talk to employees like that. So, and everybody tolerated it as long as they could and left at various points of the operation. But I mean, I think he ended up he walked away in March of 2022. And so we were winding down the company, wrapping up taxes. And I think this year of 2023, he finished in 2022. We hadn't, then we defaulted on the loan at the end of 2022. And then 2023, he just completely stopped operating and trying to run the business. And so this year we finally closed the books in the chapter on that LLC a couple of months ago. And I ended up footing the bill on the accounting fees and making sure we were closing out all of our tax returns. But
so what is the result of Chapter 7 for you, Josh?
So as it stands now, I filed bankruptcy. It impacted my credit. It's going to be on my credit history for the next seven years, 10 years, depending on what you're trying to use credit for. And so I'm now on the blacklist with the SBA. And so SBA financing, as you know, I'm still, like I alluded to earlier, this is only, the beginning chapters of my story as it relates to ETA. But I'm going to have to get creative with deal structure moving forward. And so the SBA financing is not on the table. But I do plan as I love my country, and I hate the fact that I was short of the American people, you and the rest of our listeners here, and I absolutely plan on paying back the SBA every cent plus interest. And that's why I'm really headstrong into diving into this next operation. I know what my enough bar is, driving this next operation to the point where it's throwing off enough capital to where I can grow that enterprise, but then I can make myself whole with the SBA and the American people. But
that's a noble sense of responsibility, Josh. And I guess as a taxpayer, I thank you for that, and I mean that. It's also nice to hear that somebody who's gone through such a financial trauma is still thinking about other people. Usually, we focus just on the trauma and on what the principal has experienced, but you're also focused on making everybody whole. So that's as I said, it's a noble reaction. Josh, before we start getting to some wrap-up questions, I did want to ask you about something you said early in the interview, which was your self-confidence in figuring stuff out. So in your professional life, you'd been plopped into a number of situations and figured it out and thrived. But a common pattern in ETA is buying a blue-collar business, a technical blue-collar business. HVAC is kind of the example, but not far behind is plumbing. Plumbing's extremely technical. Putting all this horrible stuff with a partner aside and the kind of the story of what happened here, but just the technical knowledge and the ability to learn to run a plumbing business as a non-plumber. Were you overly confident, or no, you could have figured that out too if all of that terrible partner stuff hadn't happened?
Yeah, I think I would have absolutely figured it out. And then the key with me is I would have learned just enough to be dangerous, but then I would have been smart enough to hire someone else. I would have promoted any one of the two master plumbers there to that role, and had the seller teach one of them, which ended up being his brother, teaching him how to actually accurately bid these projects. And then take that off of my plate. That's not my area of expertise. Let me kind of work above the business, start talking to, socializing and networking with other business owners, and look for the next acquisition opportunity. But
so you would tell other searchers who might be looking at a pretty technical blue collar business like plumbing, and they're a white collar searcher who have come from corporate or whatever, that it's doable, that they shouldn't be, this is absolutely something that can be done with zero plumbing knowledge.
No, absolutely. You just have to make sure that you have there's a right team in place. And so going back to I bought small, and there's a good team there too, but if you buy a little bit bigger, there's a management layer in place. And so you can absolutely step into a field where you don't have the technical know-how, or that you could navigate that learning curve and absolutely still do that and apply your individual skill set to it. It's just like anything else. Like if you hire, people are hiring VAs now, like, hey, I don't like doing this, or I'm not good at that. Let me hire someone else, or just delegate that out to someone else and just focus on the things that you're good at. Mm-hmm. But no, I'm still looking for a business. I'm actively looking. My buy box has changed. I'm now looking for the typical, 750 to 2 million in EBITDA. I'm open to I like construction a lot. I just like the space. I think that where we're headed now as a country, I think manufacturing is a good spot to be in as well. Light manufacturing and industrial, as well as healthcare. That's my background has been in healthcare sales and management the past 15 years. But again, taking an addressable market, identifying what those customers are, doing the customer segmentation, and then fleshing out a true way forward. That's what I'm good at. I can do that within any space once I've get through it. And I say that I'm bragging on myself there, but I'm humbly stepping in like I don't know this, get to know and understand that business, and then all right, now I feel like I've got traction here. I could step in and take things to the next level, or look for the right person if I don't already know who that is, and plug them into that space. Even if I could do the job, like I need to hire a general manager or a salesperson to be out there to do that. So.
And Josh, but why not go right back to plumbing, since you now have experience in that industry? You had a thesis around it. You got into a plumbing business. That thesis was not disproven. So you probably feel even more confidence in that initial thesis you had now that you've seen the industry from the inside. There are plumbing companies everywhere. It's a giant TAM. Why not go right back to the market and just kind of repeat the thesis, just now with older, wiser, with better partner selection or no partners?
Yeah, I think I'm open to it. And I think a lot of the things that are on market now, the price tag is a little higher now than versus buying now versus in 2020. I think private equity has entered into this space, and then they've even dropped down into the below the $2 million EBITDA range to kind of pick up some of those companies. And so the expectation, I think, with some of these sellers is like, oh, I can sell my sub $1 million EBITDA business for 7x or something. And so if you can catch them off market and you can kind of walk through and they get to know you, that's not really about the multiple. It's about them selling to you. It's like anytime you're selling, I think maybe one of your previous guests mentioned this, but people buy from people and they buy from people that they like. And so they get in, we can figure out the number. So even if you're paying a premium for it, if it's a solid business, you have a good relationship with the seller. They've got some skin in the game, either through retained equity or a seller's note. Plumbing is definitely still on the table. I guess I've expanded my box of talking to, I think, was it Adam, the previous guest, where he's like, listen, you're trying to accelerate your search in 2 months. It's like, listen, anything that's making $2 million, I'm looking at. And so to take that approach, plumbing's a part of that, but I'm looking at manufacturing. I have a box, but I'm keeping my eyes open for the right opportunity. Yeah. I've submitted a couple of LOIs right now, and really it's just about coming back. We have those conversations. They like me. I'm like, all right, great. I've got a list on my whiteboard here of different capital sources we can go to and figure out how we can creatively structure the deal, and get to close and transact on it.
And Josh, what about you being the operator for somebody else, for a searcher or a sponsor, and participating in the equity, but not being the majority owner?
Yeah, I'm 1,000% open to that too. Like, I was kind of had blinders on. I'm like, hey, I need to be the guy. I need to be the owner operator, and I need to have 100% equity. But as I've kind of revisited this, I guess I kind of rebooted everything last June. And my search, I've narrowed my search down, and I've kind of kissed a lot of frogs, so to speak. And I've put a couple of LOIs in, but I haven't closed anything yet. And so if there's a situation, given my Chapter 7 status, I'm not going to be able to be on the loan documents initially. So I have to take a 19.5% stake or some other stake or earn out where I'm not there initially. And so whatever capital partner kind of hitch my wagon to, they're going to have to kind of take on the brunt of the underwriting. And then we figure out a capital structure where eventually through time I earn back the majority equity stake, and they're comfortable with that. And so in a 3 to 5, maybe 7 year span, the dynamic shifts from 60-40 to 40-60 from their perspective. And I'm okay with having a 60% equity stake in my operation because they're buying in and investing in me, the holding company. And so I'll take 60% of a larger piece of pie. And so now with their expertise and their capital, now we can continue to go on and roll up and expand the operation. And so I don't necessarily need to be the one diving in my 401k or rolling that, doing a Robs, but leveraging other people's money that are out there. Just through Search Funder the other day, they're looking for operators. They're like, there's a ton of people that want to be LPs that don't want anything to do with the day to day, but they're looking for someone that's capable and willing to run that. And
right.
I raised my hand. I was like, absolutely. Let's talk. Let's see if there's a fit here. If you like me, people talking to me, they see me on the YouTube. I listen to the podcast, and I think one of the webinars was the first time I actually saw you. But if you see me, you like me, think that we might get along, let's talk.
Well, that's great, Josh. And I think you could absolutely be an appealing candidate as somebody who to be an operator in somebody's business. Josh, reflect for us a little bit just on, I guess, the life learning here. So we've heard a lot of the specific tactical learnings here. Operating agreement, better, proper operating agreement, better, proper, neutral counsel, much deeper diligence on a prospective partner, not being 50-50, avoiding the 50-50 split. I'm probably forgetting others. But what are there any other kind of deeper life lessons here? Trust but verify, I guess, would be a big one. Just in everything, trust but verify. You were very trusting guy, as we've talked about, and you'll probably be a little bit, sadly, probably lost a little bit of that. But maybe that's what wisdom is.
Yeah, and like I don't. That's not who I want to be. That's not who I want to be. As this just cynical person where I'm looking around the corner waiting for the other shoe to drop. I want to be optimistic and trust, whoever I'm sitting across the table with or sitting next to, and so and to the point where you can't. And so, I don't think that I'll change that much. And so, but yeah, my eyes are definitely open, and just need to take the steps to be just take your time on the front end. And just do the best that you can. And like, there's just some things when you even get into business, you just, I mean, this case in point, you just can't see happening. And so, just do the best that you can. Deeper life lesson is just like, I'm a huge faith guy. And so like I know at the end of the day, I'm just a steward of all of this. And so God he takes you through all of these ups and downs for a reason. And, he's sitting here. I think I'm a better father. I think I'm definitely be a better business partner moving forward. I think my sense of awareness is improved. And so I think it's Mandela that coined the phrase, or maybe you got to ascribe to him, but you either win or you learn, right? And so at any time, like I hate being an ex-athlete. I hate losing. I hate losing. But anytime that it's inevitable that you were going to lose sometime, you want to win the majority of the times that you lose. And so those times that you do fall a little short, you got to make sure that you're taking note, and then you make the proper adjustments so you don't lose that way again. And so, suffice it to say, I absolutely will not lose this way again. And then making sure that I have strong people around me, just having a more formal advisory board, which I already have. People that are way smarter than me, MBAs from Wharton, Duke, SMU, that I can run every deal by, that I use as a sounding board, and it can kind of keep me on my straight and narrow and be my true north as I move forward through operating whatever enterprise that is around the corner.
Great. Well, Josh, you seem to me as somebody who I'm not surprised to hear that you're grounded in faith, because you seem to be calm wouldn't be the right word, but I don't know what the right word is, but you seem to have processed all of this rather philosophically. And, just to contrast you with your partner who was the busted pipe or whatever, the pipe under pressure and it busted or whatever, who clearly couldn't, his reaction to adversity in life was the polar opposite of yours, which is with humility and calm. I know we're also talking to you now a good year plus later, so you've had time to process it, but you come off that way at least.
I guess the other point
I applaud you for that. Yeah.
Well, thanks. Well, I appreciate that. I think the other thing too is that I had to get to a point where I've had to forgive him for my own peace of mind. Like, it was, being in that situation was stressful enough, but then harboring any resentment. It's just, at this point, it's just lessons learned, and like forgiving him. Like he's a human, he's a child of God. I had to forgive him so I could truly move forward, and so I could go into this next stage of my life, this next chapter of my journey with clear eyes. And so, forgiveness, I think, would be a huge part of this as well.
Well, we could spend a lot of time on that. That's also your faith talking. I'm not sure I would have that. I have that particular muscle as well developed. I'm not sure I could find my way to forgive this person.
Although I have my moments, but trust me, I'm human, where I've used a lot of 4-letter words. But again, ultimately, I know you just got to move forward and forgive him. And sometimes that forgiveness, I've probably forgiven him hundreds of times, because tomorrow I'll be sitting here. It's gotten better, as you're alluding to earlier. Over time, I've gotten to the point where I'm like, okay, this sucked that happened. What can I learn from it? It happened to him too. And so he has a perspective on it too. Like, we just disagree. We completely disagree. Like a lot of people do in a political climate, like they have a different way forward. And so his way forward hadn't proven successful to that point. And so he just wasn't able to see a different path or allow me space to do that. And, had we had the proper agreement in place, we could have both moved forward with our lives, and maybe still been friends to this day. But again, he's forgiven. wishing the best for him and his next whatever endeavors wherever he's going on in life, and I'll do the same here with me and my family.
Beautiful perspective. Let's call it there, Josh. If people want to reach out to you, maybe if somebody else is struggling, maybe if they want to talk to you about an opportunity or something in between, how do you prefer they do that?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Josh Key. Email is a great way to get a hold of me too. My email is josh@castlekeyholdings.com. Well, maybe you could drop that in the show notes, but email or LinkedIn would be the best way. And then from there, we'll connect via phone, and I'm an open book. I'll talk to anybody. I'm willing to help anybody. Like I truly believe in, and the reason why I wanted to do this kind of part A with you now is just to help anybody else that avoid any missteps that I made in their journey towards entrepreneurship. And yeah, I truly wish everyone the best. And again, thank you for this opportunity. It's been just the episodes that I listen to here has been an education, and the connections, and even how we got connected here through Adam. It's been phenomenal. So the future is bright for everyone in this space. You just gotta take the appropriate steps, and I think more often than not, this will turn out better than it did in my case. But story still unwritten. The rest of my story is still unwritten.
That's right. Josh Key, thank you very much again for doing this for the community. Very generous of you. We really appreciate this story. We really appreciate anybody who's gone through a really challenging experience and is willing to share it up here on stage. It's really, really a selfless act of you. So thank you.
My pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. Make sure you subscribe to the Acquiring Minds channel below. We are now publishing twice a week. So tons of new interviews and stories to come. Stories that will help you along your own path to acquiring a business.